The first thing I noticed was my heartbeat. Not the steady rhythm that had faithfully carried me through 68 years, but an erratic flutter that sent a chill down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. My hands, fingers twisted from rheumatoid arthritis, trembled as I organized quarterly investment statements. The Victorian home my husband Richard and I had lovingly restored over our 41-year marriage suddenly felt too quiet, the grandfather clocks ticking, matching the irregular pounding in my chest. "Just breathe through it," I whispered, using the same measured tone I'd employed with anxious students during my 32 years as an elementary school principal. But the pressure built, a vice-like tightness spreading across my chest. As I reached for the phone, the room tilted sideways, papers scattering across my office floor. "My name is Harriet Donovan. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of how my son-in-law tried to take everything I spent a lifetime building: my home, my finances, my dignity, all while convincing my daughter I was too confused to manage my own life." What he didn't anticipate, the same documentation skills I'd used as an elementary school principal for 32 years, would ultimately expose his plan. If this situation resonates with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. My last clear memory was of Martha, my neighbor of 20 years, kneeling beside me, her voice distant as she spoke to 911. "She's conscious but not responding normally." Yes, 1842 Cypress Lane. The hospital ceiling came into focus first, institutional tiles I stared at while conversation fragments floated around me. The medication made everything hazy, but certain words cut through with perfect clarity. "Mom's been having memory issues lately," said my son-in-law Peter. "She gets confused about her medication sometimes." I wanted to protest. I'd never confused my medications. I'd managed school budgets and raised a daughter while earning my doctorate. But the words wouldn't come, my tongue heavy from whatever they'd given me in the ambulance. "We've been worried about her living alone," Peter continued, his voice carrying practiced concern. "My wife and I have been helping with her finances since her husband died." That wasn't true. I'd managed my finances meticulously since Richard's death 5 years ago. The life insurance, $445,000, his pension, and our investments, $450,000, were all carefully tracked in my household ledger, just as they had been for 4 decades. Through half-closed eyes, I saw my daughter Claire's face, worry etching lines around her mouth. At 35, she looked so much like I had at her age, the same auburn hair and questioning eyes. But there was something new, a willingness to defer to her husband that I'd never modeled for her. "The doctor says it was atrial fibrillation," Claire explained. "You're going to be okay, Mom. We're here now." I tried to speak, managing only a raspy whisper. "I don't get confused." Peter patted my hand with the practiced precision of someone checking an item off a list. "Don't worry about anything, Harriet. We've got everything under control." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The doctors think you should stay a few days for observation." The last thing I heard was Peter's voice, gentle but firm as he spoke about me rather than to me. "We'll need to discuss some changes to her living situation. Obviously, she can't continue alone like this." 3 days later, Claire and Peter helped me through my front door. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood, a welcome relief after the antiseptic hospital environment. My Victorian home, the one Richard and I had lovingly restored, stood exactly as I'd left it, yet something felt subtly different. As I settled into my armchair, small discrepancies registered. My reading glasses on the wrong table, the investment literature I'd been reviewing, nowhere to be seen, and my home office door, which I always kept closed, standing slightly ajar. "Did someone tidy up my office?" I asked when Claire brought me tea. She hesitated. "Peter thought it might be helpful to organize some of your paperwork while you were in the hospital. I would prefer if he didn't touch my financial documents," I said carefully, measuring my tone the way I had when addressing concerned parents during my years as principal. "Mom, he's just trying to help. He does this professionally. Remember? And you have to admit, it's a lot for one person to manage." That night, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people in my home. One thing was becoming increasingly clear. Something had shifted during those 3 days in the hospital, and not just my heart rhythm. The next morning, when I finally made it to my office, my suspicions were confirmed. The space had been completely reorganized, my meticulous filing system rearranged, desk drawers in different order. As I began to restore order, a folded paper slipped from between 2 folders, a transfer authorization form for my largest investment account, partially completed with my name typed in, but not yet signed. A cold wave washed over me, more jarring than the heart palpitations had been. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt truly vulnerable. But 32 years as an elementary school principal had taught me something valuable. When facing a crisis, document everything before acting. They thought my memory was failing, that I was confused and declining. But what they didn't realize was that the same organizational mind that had managed a school of 500 children and 42 staff members was now focusing its full attention on understanding exactly what they were planning. What Peter saw as vulnerability, I recognized as clarity. For the first time, I was seeing my son-in-law without the filter of family loyalty, and what I saw sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my heart condition. For the next 4 days, I maintained a careful facade of compliance while documenting everything. Peter's insistence on accompanying me to medical appointments, Claire's reluctance to leave me alone, the gradually increasing control over my daily routine. "I've set up auto bill pay for all your utilities," Peter announced at breakfast, not asking if I wanted this change. "One less thing for you to worry about." I nodded while noting that this gave him access to my checking account. "That's thoughtful, but I've managed my bills for 41 years without missing a payment." "Times change, Harriet," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Digital banking makes everything more efficient." What he didn't know, I'd been using online banking since 2006. My technological hesitance was now deliberate, a way to observe what Peter would try to help with next. That afternoon, while Peter was at work and Claire was shopping, I received an unexpected call from Walter Davidson, my former vice principal. "Harriet, just checking in. Haven't seen you at the retired educators' lunch in 2 weeks." My voice dropped. I had a cardiac episode. Atrial fibrillation. "I'm home now, but my daughter and son-in-law are staying with me." Walter said, his tone shifting. "Staying with you, or staying with your house?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" When my son-in-law moved in after my hip replacement, he was suddenly very interested in my financial portfolio, called it helping. 3 months later, I discovered he'd been siphoning funds from my accounts. My fingers tightened around the phone. "What did you do?" "Documentation. Then confrontation with witnesses present. The same strategy we used with problematic school board members." He paused. "My neighbor Sylvia is an elder law attorney now. Would you like her number? Just in case?" I wrote down Sylvia Morgan's contact information, a small ember of hope igniting. "Walter, don't tell anyone about my condition. Especially not Peter or Claire if they call. Principal-vice principal confidentiality still applies." His voice softened. "Trust your instincts, Harriet. They served you well for 32 years. That evening, I was arranging my medication when I overheard Claire and Peter in the kitchen, their voices carrying through the heating vent, a quirk of old Victorian homes I'd never mentioned. "The cardiologist says she's stable, but I'm concerned about her living alone," Peter said. "Those stairs, the yard work, managing the bills, it's a lot for someone her age." "She seems fine to me," Claire replied. "Mom's always been so capable." That's what everyone thought about my grandfather too, until he nearly burned the house down for getting a pot on the stove. Peter's voice took on his persuasive financial advisor tone. "It starts small, forgotten appointments, misplaced items, confusion about finances. By the time it's obvious, it's often too late." "You really think she's declining?" Claire asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard in years. "I'm not saying she needs full-time care yet, but this house is too much for her. The equity alone is over $650,000. If we sold it, we could find her a nice one-level condo near us and invest the difference to supplement her income. My blood ran cold at how precisely he'd calculated my home's value. What about all her memories here with Dad? This is their dream home. Memories don't pay for in-home care if she falls, Claire. Besides, the market is perfect right now. My client, Brandon, at Phoenix Realty says he could list it without even putting a sign in the yard. So Peter had already spoken to a realtor about selling my home. The realization landed like a physical blow. I've already found some excellent assisted living communities. Morningside Gardens has an opening next month. We could tour it this weekend. The brochure I'd found in my desk suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't a recent idea prompted by my health scare. This was a plan already in motion. I returned to my bedroom and pulled out the notebook I'd hidden in my jewelry box. Under today's date, I recorded the conversation verbatim, my principal's training in accurate documentation serving me well. A pattern was emerging, one I recognized from professional development workshops on elder financial abuse. Peter wasn't just concerned about my welfare, he was systematically positioning himself to control my assets. The house, the investments, my retirement savings, all while convincing Claire it was for my own good. The next morning, I called Sylvia Morgan from Walter's landline while Peter and Claire were out. My name is Harriet Donovan. Walter Davidson suggested I call you. I believe my son-in-law is attempting to gain control of my finances following a minor health incident. Are you alone right now? She asked. Yes, but only temporarily. Then let's be efficient. Can you safely get to my office Monday at 10 a.m.? Tell them you have a hair appointment. Yes, I said, feeling a surge of determination that had carried me through decades of school administration. That evening, I heard Peter on the phone in the guest room, his voice clear through the heating vent. The house alone is worth over $650,000, Brandon. Her investments are around $450,000, plus the life insurance she hasn't touched. Once we get her relocated to assisted living, we can access everything to manage for her benefit, of course. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing to keep my heart rate steady. No, she hasn't been officially evaluated for competency, but after this cardiac incident, it wouldn't be hard to make the case. Yes, I have power of attorney paperwork ready. The sooner we get the house listed, the better. I hadn't signed any power of attorney. The realization of what he was planning sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just about selling my house. Peter was preparing to have me declared incompetent. Opening my notebook, I added this new information with shaking but determined hands. Monday's appointment with Sylvia couldn't come soon enough. What had started as suspicion was now undeniable. The pattern was complete. Peter didn't just want to help. He wanted everything. Monday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt since my retirement. I'd told Claire and Peter I had a hair appointment, a reasonable activity for someone recovering from a health scare, and Martha had readily agreed to drive me. He took your mail yesterday, she mentioned as we drove toward what Peter believed was my salon. I was gardening and saw him intercept the postal carrier before he reached your box. You noticed that? I asked, surprised by this external confirmation. I've been watching more carefully since your cardiac episode, Martha admitted. Something about your son-in-law makes my teacher radar ping. 38 years in the classroom. You develop a sense for people who aren't what they seem. The law offices of Morgan & Associates occupied a modest building downtown. Sylvia Morgan greeted us in the lobby, a woman perhaps my age, with silver hair cut in a practical bob, and eyes that miss nothing. Mrs. Donovan, thank you for coming. She shook my hand firmly. Walter speaks very highly of your administrative abilities. In her office, I presented my documentation, the notebook with dated entries, photographs of the transfer form, the assisted living brochure, and recordings of 2 conversations I'd captured using my phone's voice memo function. You've been thorough, Sylvia noted approvingly, as she reviewed the materials. Most clients come to me after assets have already been transferred. I recognized the pattern, I explained. Before I retired, We had mandatory training on recognizing elder abuse, including financial exploitation. Sylvia nodded. Your documentation shows a clear escalation pattern. Has he directly asked you to sign anything yet? Not yet, but I found power of attorney paperwork in his briefcase this morning while they were out walking. He's highlighted where I would sign. That confirms our timeline is short. She opened a folder on her desk. Based on what you've shared, I've prepared several documents for us to discuss. For the next hour, Sylvia outlined a comprehensive protection strategy, legal safeguards for my assets, revocation of any implied permissions Peter might claim, and documentation of my cognitive competence. I'd like to bring in Dr. Levine for a cognitive assessment, she explained. Having an independent evaluation on record will be crucial if your son-in-law attempts to challenge your competence. He would do that? Martha asked, sounding shocked. I've handled over 200 elder financial exploitation cases, Sylvia replied, her voice measured but firm. When confronted, family members often claim they were acting out of concern for diminished capacity. Having a recent assessment from a respected neurologist eliminates that argument. As Sylvia continued explaining the legal protections we would put in place, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged began to lift. For the first time since discovering the transfer form, I felt something beyond anxiety and betrayal. I felt the return of agency. There's something else, I said, reaching into my purse for a folded paper I discovered that morning. I found this bank statement showing a new joint account opened in my name, and Peter's 3 days after my hospitalization. I never authorized this. Sylvia's expression hardened as she examined the document. This changes our approach. If he's already moving funds, we need to act immediately. She picked up her phone and spoke briefly to her assistant, then turned back to me. Dr. Levine can see you after lunch. I've also asked my paralegal to prepare emergency financial protection orders. By end of day, we'll have legal safeguards in place. The morning's revelations had opened a door I couldn't close. The full scope of Peter's intentions now undeniable. He hadn't just been planning to control my assets. He had already begun the process, using my health crisis as cover. During a break, Martha touched my arm gently. Are you all right? This is a lot to process. I considered the question carefully. I'm angry. Deeply angry. But there's something else too. A strange sense of clarity. For weeks, I felt something was wrong, but questioned my own perceptions. Now I know I wasn't imagining things. Martha nodded. Gaslighting. My sister went through something similar with her son-in-law. By the time she realized what was happening, he'd sold her vacation property and emptied 2 accounts. What happened? I asked. She was too embarrassed to fight back, legally. Didn't want family to know she'd been fooled, Martha sighed. She never recovered financially or emotionally, really. Her words crystallized something for me. This wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about standing firm in my own truth against someone trying to rewrite my narrative. Dr. Levine's cognitive assessment that afternoon was thorough. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, judgment scenarios. I approached each evaluation with the same focus I'd once brought to school accreditation reviews. Mrs. Donovan, Dr. Levine said, as we concluded, your cognitive function is excellent. Better than many patients 20 years younger. I see no evidence of impairment that would justify surrendering financial control to anyone. His official report would be sent directly to Sylvia, providing crucial evidence against any claim Peter might make about my capacity. By late afternoon, we had implemented a comprehensive protection plan. My accounts secured against unauthorized access, legal notices prepared for financial institutions, and a revocation of any implied authority Peter might claim over my affairs. What happens when I go home? I asked Sylvia as we finalized the documents. Peter and Claire are still staying with me. That's your choice, Sylvia replied. We can handle the confrontation immediately, or you can return home while we complete the legal preparations for a more strategic approach. I thought of Claire, caught between her husband and her mother, not fully understanding what was happening. I need time to prepare my daughter. She doesn't realize what Peter is doing. Then we proceed carefully. Go home, maintain the appearance of normalcy, and we'll have everything in place for a controlled confrontation by Friday. Sylvia handed me a small card with her private number. Call anytime if the situation escalates. On the drive home, Martha asked the question I'd been anticipating. What will you do about Claire? She's as much a victim of his manipulation as you are. The question struck at the heart of my dilemma. Claire wasn't just my daughter. She was a grown woman who had chosen this man, built a life with him. The revelation of his true character would shatter her world. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I won't let Peter's actions destroy my relationship with my daughter. Somehow, I need to separate the two. That night, as I sat in my bedroom reviewing the day's revelations, I slipped on my wedding ring, the one I'd continued wearing after Richard's death. I won't let him take what we built, Richard, I whispered. Not our home, not our savings, not my dignity. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply and without anxiety. The path ahead would be difficult. Confronting Peter, helping Claire see the truth, rebuilding the independence that had been systematically undermined. But now I moved forward with allies, with evidence, and most importantly, with absolute certainty in my own perceptions. What Peter had failed to understand was that he hadn't just targeted a vulnerable widow with assets to exploit. He had challenged a woman who had spent decades handling school district politics, managing difficult personalities, and protecting what mattered most. He had underestimated me profoundly. By Friday, he would understand exactly how serious that miscalculation had been. The next 3 days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated chess match. On the surface, I maintained the role Peter expected, the recovering patient gradually accepting her diminished capacity. But beneath this facade, I was methodically implementing the protection strategy Sylvia and I had developed. Tuesday morning, while Claire drove Peter to work because his car was in the shop, I made 2 critical calls. First to my bank, confirming the protection orders Sylvia had filed, and verifying that no further transactions could occur without my in-person authorization. Then to Walter, who had gathered 5 former colleagues willing to attend Friday's confrontation as witnesses. They're all people Peter's never met, Walter assured me. Elizabeth Chambers, James Wilson, Patricia Rodriguez, all former administrators who understand documentation and can testify to your cognitive clarity. The network I'd built over 32 years was becoming my strongest asset. Just as I had once told graduating seniors that their relationships would ultimately matter more than their grades. When Peter returned that evening, he brought dinner and a carefully casual demeanor. Harriet, I was thinking we should review your investment portfolio tomorrow, he said, passing me a container of my favorite pasta. Just to make sure everything's properly allocated, given your health considerations. That sounds reasonable, I replied. Would afternoon work? I have a follow-up call with Dr. Martinez in the morning. This was untrue. My actual plan involved meeting with my longtime investment advisor, who had been shocked to learn of Peter's unauthorized activities. The medical appointment provided perfect cover, as Peter was unlikely to verify it. Wednesday unfolded, according to my timeline. While Peter believed I was consulting my cardiologist, I was actually securing my financial foundations with people who had managed my investments for years. People who knew me as a meticulous planner, not a declining elder. Mrs. Donovan, I was concerned when I saw the transfer attempt. Mr. Ramirez, my investment advisor of 15 years, explained. It didn't match your established patterns, but it came with documentation claiming to be authorized by you during your hospitalization. Documentation I never signed, I clarified. I suspected as much, which is why I placed a temporary hold, he replied. In 30 years of financial advising, I've developed a sense for when something isn't right. By noon, we had implemented additional security protocols across all my accounts, 2-factor authentication, in-person verification requirements, and removal of any telephone transaction capabilities that Peter might exploit. Returning home before Peter could question my whereabouts, I found Claire sorting through old photographs in the living room. "Mom, look what I found," she said, holding up a picture from her college graduation. Richard and I standing proudly beside her. Dad was so happy that day. The opening was perfect, unplanned, but precisely what I needed to begin preparing her for Friday's revelations. "Your father built our life very intentionally," I said carefully. "The investments, this home, the provisions for my future. He wanted to ensure I would always be secure, even without him." Claire nodded. "He was always so organized about finances." "We both were," I corrected gently. "Your father and I made every major financial decision together for 41 years. After he died, I continued managing everything exactly as we had planned." Claire looked up sharply. "Of course you did, Mom. I didn't mean to imply. I just want you to remember that I'm still the same person who helped put you through college without a penny of debt. My heart may have had a brief irregularity, but my mind remains quite capable." That afternoon, when Peter suggested reviewing my investments, I approached the conversation differently than he expected. "Before we start," I said, retrieving a file from my reorganized office, "I'd like to show you something." I opened the folder containing 30 years of investment performance records. Meticulous documentation of every financial decision Richard and I had made, followed by my solo management after his death. "This is quite impressive," Peter acknowledged, clearly not expecting such thorough records. "But market conditions change, Harriet. What worked in the past might not be optimal for your current situation." "You mean my health situation?" I said directly. He nodded, his expression conveying practiced concern. "Exactly. We need to consider accessibility, liquidity, possibly restructuring assets to cover potential care needs." "Peter," I said, my voice taking on the calm authority I'd once used with overconfident school board members. "In the 5 years since Richard's death, my investment portfolio has outperformed the market by an average of 2.3% annually. That's not accident or luck, it's careful management." His smile tightened slightly. "No one's questioning your past success, Harriet. I'm thinking about your future security." "As am I," I replied evenly, "which is why I've maintained the balanced approach Richard and I developed over 4 decades. For the next hour, I guided our conversation away from signing authorities or transfers, instead discussing market trends and investment philosophy in terms that made my financial literacy unmistakable. With each informed question and observation, I could see Peter reassessing his approach, realizing I wasn't the easy mark he had anticipated. That evening, I overheard him on the phone, his voice carrying through the heating vent. "It's more complicated than I expected," he was saying. "She's more aware than typical for someone her age. No, I still think we can proceed, but we might need to adjust the timeline. The house is still the primary asset, worth at least $650,000 in this market, so selling my home remained his priority." The knowledge strengthened my resolve for Friday's confrontation. Thursday brought the final preparations. While Peter was at work and Claire was shopping, Sylvia came to the house with final documentation and to review our strategy. "Everything is in place legally," she assured me. "Your accounts are secured, the cognitive assessment is documented, and we have witnesses arranged for tomorrow's meeting." "What should I expect from Peter?" I asked. "Based on my experience, he'll likely cycle through several predictable responses," Sylvia explained. "First denial, then concern about your mental state, followed by attempts to portray himself as misunderstood. If those fail, he may become angry or attempt to turn Claire against you. The thought of my daughter caught in this conflict remained my greatest concern. Claire doesn't know what's happening yet." "That's often the case," Sylvia acknowledged. "Family members are kept in the dark or gradually manipulated into becoming unwitting accomplices. How you handle her involvement tomorrow will be critical." In my bedroom that night, I laid out my clothes for the morning, not the casual recovery wear Peter had grown accustomed to seeing, but the tailored blazer and slacks I'd worn to school board meetings. Professional attire for a professional confrontation. On my nightstand, sat a framed photo of Richard and me on our 40th anniversary. "Almost there," I whispered to his image. "By tomorrow afternoon, our home and everything we built, it'll be secure again." For the first time since my cardiac episode, I felt fully reconnected to my core identity, not just as Richard's widow or Claire's mother, but as Harriet Donovan, the woman who had led an entire school through difficult transitions, weathered budget crises, and stood firm when difficult decisions needed to be made. Peter had seen only what he expected to see, an aging woman made vulnerable by health concerns and grief. Tomorrow he would discover his profound miscalculation. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, both the autumn sky outside my window and my own sense of purpose. I dressed deliberately in my navy blazer and gray slacks, the outfit I'd worn to countless school board meetings when difficult truths needed to be spoken. In the bathroom mirror, I saw not the vulnerable patient of recent weeks, but the school administrator I had been for 32 years, back straight, gaze steady, ready to address a situation that required resolution. When I entered the kitchen, Claire looked up from her coffee with visible surprise. "You look like you're heading to a school function," she said. "In a way, I am," I replied, pouring myself tea. "Today's meeting is professional in nature." Peter entered, already scanning his phone for messages. He glanced up, his expression shifting subtly as he registered my appearance. "You're certainly dressed up this morning. Appropriate attire for the discussion ahead," I said evenly. At 9:30, Martha arrived to drive me to Sylvia's office, where Walter and 3 other former school administrators were waiting. Dr. Levine had also joined us, bringing his official cognitive assessment report. "You look like yourself again, Harriet," Walter said, clasping my hand warmly. "I feel like myself," I confirmed. "Thank you all for being here today." Sylvia reviewed our approach one final time. "Remember, this isn't about punishment, but protection. Stick to documented facts. Emotions may run high, especially with your daughter present, but maintaining composure will demonstrate your capacity more effectively than any medical report could." At precisely 11,000, we arrived back at my home. Peter's expression when he opened the door to find me, accompanied by 6 people, Martha, Walter, 3 former administrators, and Sylvia, carrying a leather portfolio, was a brief but telling moment of recalculation. "Peter, Claire," I said calmly as we entered the living room, "these are my colleagues and friends. Some you know, like Martha, and others you're meeting for the first time. This is Walter Davidson, my former vice principal. Doc James Wilson, retired superintendent, Elizabeth Chambers and Patricia Rodriguez, former principals, and Sylvia Morgan, my attorney." "Your attorney?" Claire asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Mom, what's going on?" I gestured for everyone to sit. The formal arrangement of chairs prepared while Peter and Claire had breakfast on the patio created a setting reminiscent of the conference room where I'd once conducted difficult parent meetings. "Claire, Peter," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Over the past 2 weeks, since my cardiac episode, a pattern of concerning actions has emerged that requires direct address. I've asked these trusted colleagues to be present as witnesses to this discussion." Peter leaned forward, his expression instantly transforming to one of concerned confusion. "Harriet, what are you talking about? We've only been trying to help during your recovery." Sylvia opened her portfolio and removed a document. "Mr. Parker, we have documented evidence of unauthorized financial activities conducted in Mrs. Donovan's name following her hospitalization." "What?" Claire looked between Peter and me, bewilderment clear on her face. "First," I said, maintaining my professional tone, "a joint bank account was opened at First National Bank, linking my assets to Peter's access without my knowledge or consent." "That was just for convenience during your recovery," Peter interjected smoothly. "So we could help manage bills while you focused on getting better," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Second, investment transfer forms were prepared with my name, ready for signature. that would have moved substantial assets from my controlled accounts to management under Peter's firm. "Mom, I'm sure there's just a misunderstanding," Claire said, her voice uncertain. "Peter was trying to organize things to reduce your stress after the heart incident." "Third," I pressed on, "Peter has contacted a real estate agent named Brandon about selling this house, describing it as worth at least $650,000 in this market, and indicating plans were underway to relocate me to assisted living." Claire's head snapped toward Peter. "You called a realtor about Mom's house?" "When?" Peter's composure slipped momentarily before he regained control. "I was just exploring options, gathering information for a potential future discussion. Nothing was decided." Sylvia placed 3 documents on the coffee table. "We have records of the unauthorized bank account, the prepared transfer forms, and phone records confirming multiple conversations with Brandon Reynolds of Phoenix Realty, including one call last week lasting 22 minutes. The evidence, concrete, documented, undeniable, hung in the air between us." Claire stared at the papers, then at her husband, comprehension dawning in her eyes. "Peter?" Her voice held a question she clearly didn't want answered. Peter shifted strategies, his expression transforming to one of patient explanation. "This is getting blown completely out of proportion. Everything I've done has been with Harriet's best interests in mind. After her cardiac episode, it became clear she needed more support with complex financial matters." Dr. Wilson spoke up, his superintendent's voice carrying natural authority. "Mrs. Donovan underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment this week. Dr. Levine, would you share your findings?" Dr. Levine nodded professionally. "Mrs. Donovan's cognitive function tests in the superior range for her age group. There is absolutely no clinical justification for limitations on her financial or personal decision-making capacity." "No one said she was incapacitated," Peter countered, his tone sharpening. "But managing a house this size, complex investments, all while recovering from a serious health event, anyone would need assistance." I met his gaze directly. "Peter, I have recordings of your phone conversations discussing plans to have me declared incompetent." The color drained from his face. "What?" Claire whispered, looking stricken. I turned to my daughter, softening my voice. "Claire, the heating vent in my bedroom connects to the guest room. I've heard Peter's phone calls discussing his plans to access my assets once I was relocated to assisted living." "That's absurd," Peter said, but his denial lacked conviction. "You're misinterpreting." "May I play the recording?" I asked, removing my phone from my pocket. Peter stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're recording private conversations in your home? That could be illegal." "Actually," Sylvia interjected, "in this state, recording conversations in one's own home when there's reasonable suspicion of financial exploitation is explicitly permitted under elder protection statutes." Claire sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the documents before her. "You opened a bank account without telling me? Without telling Mom?" The dynamic had shifted. Peter was no longer controlling the narrative, and his practiced confidence was crumbling under the weight of documented evidence. "Claire, honey, this is getting distorted," he said, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. "Your mother had a serious cardiac event. The doctors recommended reducing stress. I was putting protective measures in place." "By selling her house." Claire's voice had grown stronger, clearer. "By moving her to assisted living without even discussing it with me." I watched my daughter carefully, seeing the awakening of awareness in her expression. The same determination that had gotten her through college and into her career. In that moment, despite the painful circumstances, I felt a surge of pride. "I found these in Peter's briefcase," I said, placing the assisted living brochures on the table. Several units were already marked, including one described as available next month. Claire picked up one brochure, recognition dawning. "This is what you showed me on your iPad last week. You said you were just researching options for the future." "We were," Peter insisted. "That's all this was, exploring options, being prepared." "Then why?" Claire asked, her voice steady now. "Did you tell me yesterday that we weren't considering assisted living yet?" that it was too soon to have that conversation with Mom. The contradiction hung in the air, undeniable. I turned to Sylvia, who presented the next document. This is a formal notice revoking any implied or explicit financial authority Mr. Parker may have claimed. It has already been filed with all relevant financial institutions. Additionally, she continued, this document confirms Mrs. Donovan's cognitive competence and explicitly rejects any challenge to her capacity for independent decision-making. After several minutes of tense discussion, Claire stood suddenly. I need some air, she said, her voice thick with emotion, as she walked quickly to the back door and stepped into the garden. As the confrontation concluded, Peter left with a suitcase of belongings. The terms of our separation clear. All unauthorized financial actions would be reversed, the joint account closed, and he would have no further involvement in my financial affairs. The professional network that had sustained me throughout my career had proven equally valuable in protecting my future. What had begun as vulnerability during a health crisis had transformed into a clear demonstration of continued competence. Peter had seen an aging widow made vulnerable by health concerns and grief. What he had actually encountered was a woman whose lifetime of experience had prepared her precisely for this moment of challenge. 6 months after the confrontation with Peter, I stood at the podium in the community center, facing an audience of 47 seniors, all attending my newly created workshop, Protecting Your Financial Independence, Recognition and Response Strategies. When I experienced a cardiac episode last fall, I began, my voice carrying easily through the room, as it had during countless school assemblies. I never imagined it would lead to an attempted financial exploitation by my own son-in-law. Today, I'm sharing my experience not as a victim, but as someone who found unexpected strength in skills developed throughout a lifetime of professional service. The journey to this moment had unfolded gradually, each step building upon the last. After the confrontation, Claire had stayed with her friend Jessica for 3 weeks, processing the painful revelations about her husband. Our relationship, initially strained by the shock of discovery, had strengthened through honest conversations about what had happened. I keep thinking I should have seen it, she had confessed during a Sunday dinner a month after the confrontation. There were signs. His increased interest in your finances, the way he spoke about your house as if it were already an asset to be liquidated. Manipulation is most effective when conducted by someone you trust, I had replied, remembering Sylvia's words. You saw what a loving husband would do, offering support during a family health crisis. There's no shame in believing someone you loved was acting honorably. The divorce proceedings had begun shortly after, with Claire displaying a resilience that reminded me powerfully of myself during difficult periods. The same straight-backed determination, the same clear-eyed focus on necessary truths rather than comfortable illusions. Now, scanning the attentive faces in the community center, I continued my presentation. The tools that protected me weren't extraordinary. They were skills developed during my 32 years as an elementary school principal. Syntactic documentation, alliance building, strategic timing, and perhaps most importantly, trusting my own perceptions when they contradicted what others claimed I was experiencing. In the front row sat Walter, Martha, and Claire, my core support network through this transformation. Behind them, scattered throughout the audience, were several former educators who had served as witnesses during the confrontation, now volunteering as facilitators for the small group discussions that would follow my presentation. Many of you built successful careers that equipped you with valuable skills, I said, making eye contact with different audience members. Those capabilities don't diminish with retirement or age. The financial advisor who dismisses your investment knowledge, the family member who questions your memory when you challenge their actions, they're not seeing your full personhood, only the stereotype they expect to see. The workshops had evolved from an idea to a structured program. Walter had connected me with the community center director. Sylvia had provided legal frameworks. My former colleagues had volunteered facilitation skills, and Claire, still healing from her own wounds, had helped design the practical exercises that would follow my presentation. Life had found a new rhythm, different from before my health crisis, but rich with purpose and connection. My home remained my sanctuary, its rooms now occasionally hosting planning meetings for the senior financial literacy program we were WEFing. After the workshop, as attendees broke into discussion groups, Claire approached the podium. "You were magnificent," she said, her expression reflecting genuine admiration. "Just like when you used to lead school assemblies when I was little. I'd sit in the back, pretending I wasn't related to the principal, but secretly feeling so proud." I smiled, touching her hand. "How are you doing with everything?" "Really?" The divorce proceedings had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, a painful but necessary conclusion. Peter, facing potential criminal charges for the unauthorized bank account, had agreed to an uncontested divorce in exchange for Sylvia's recommendation against pursuing formal exploitation charges. "Some days are harder than others," Claire admitted. "But I'm getting there. The new position at the architectural firm helps, focusing on historic building preservation, gives me purpose, and seeing you turn this experience into something that helps others, it reminds me we can rebuild after difficult chapters." Martha joined us, her practicality a grounding force as always. "Harriet, there are at least 3 people who want to speak with you about presenting this workshop at their retirement communities. You're becoming quite the in-demand speaker." Who would have thought a cardiac episode would lead to a post-retirement career in financial literacy education? I laughed. "It's more than that," Claire observed thoughtfully. "You're helping people reclaim their sense of agency. That's what I see happening in these workshops. People remembering their own capabilities." The following Sunday, I hosted a planning meeting for the next phase of workshops. Walter, Martha, Sylvia, and Claire gathered around my dining room table. The support network that had stood with me during confrontation now partnering in creation. "We should expand beyond financial exploitation," Walter suggested. "Address medical advocacy, housing security, technological independence, all areas where seniors face potential manipulation. A comprehensive empowerment program," I agreed, the educator in me recognizing the broader possibilities. That evening, after everyone had gone, I stood in my garden watching the setting sun illuminate the Victorian home that had almost been taken from me. The property Peter had viewed as merely a $650,000 asset remained what it had always been, the physical embodiment of a life built with intention and care. I am Harriet Donovan. I was an elementary school principal for 32 years. I am a widow, a mother, a friend, and now a community educator, helping others protect their independence. My cardiac event didn't diminish me. It revealed depths of resilience I might never have discovered otherwise. Some might see this story as one of preventing financial exploitation. But its deeper truth is about remembering who we are when others try to redefine us. About recognizing that the skills we develop throughout a lifetime remain ours to tow upon, exactly when we need them most. Peter saw a vulnerability to exploit. He never recognized he was actually facing a strength he couldn't overcome.